start. Said 5:30, they were here, let's show them respect.
Okay, Harlan says we should start. So we're missing a couple of panels, but we're going to start up anyways. Hi folks, my name is Denise Loubert. I'm the publisher of Silverman Comics. And some of you may know me from my days with Renegade Press, and before that with Aardvark, Manheim, and Cerebus. And we're here today to talk about Hollywood and comic books. We've all expected for a long time that the direction Hollywood was going in, where they were getting more and more comic book properties, there was bound to be a time when they would meet up together in the middle and somehow or another we would be producing comic books in Hollywood. And I think the time has come. So I went to the convention and I said I want to talk about this with some people who've been doing it. On my left is Harlan Ellison. A lot of you folks must know him. Harlan's going to share his way too many experiences with Hollywood. And we'll try to keep it to like, 6 hours. Harlan is currently putting together, thank you, Peter. Harlan is currently putting together a project for us at Silverman Comics, where we're hoping we're going to give you a little bit of an insight of Hollywood and the entertainment business through the eyes of Harlan Ellison and his cohort in crime and writer on the series, Jan Sternad, and we'll talk a little bit about that. To his left is Peter David. A lot of you may have heard about Peter's experiences with Hollywood and with filmmaking. Full Moon Entertainment, which is a company I'm somewhat loosely affiliated with, makes a few movies in Romania every year, and Peter wrote about it, but I digress, and now you know the horrors of working in Romania. And he's going to share with us his experiences about Hollywood. On my right is Mr. Charles Band, the owner and CEO of Full Moon Entertainment. Charlie's not only the Stan Lee for Full Moon, he comes up with all the concepts for all the movies, but he's also coming up with concepts for us to do Silverman Comics. He's going to talk to us about his vision of comics in Hollywood and where he thinks they come together. I'm going to start this off with Harlan. Give you just a brief question to play with. We know that you had some interesting experiences with Twilight Zone. I know you're currently working on Babylon 5. Can you use those as an example of the different kinds of experiences you've run into regarding your working relationship with Hollywood, and especially regarding creative control of Hollywood?
Nice. Simple.
Well, I've said this before, it's not a fresh, yeah, you said it, kid. That's what you hear at story conferences for the most part. I've said this before, but trying to convey a plot idea to a network executive is like reading Voltaire to a cage of baboons. One of the problems in addressing a crowd like this that is not work a day every day in the movie business is that a great many of you believe a lot of the mythology, a lot of the cranked out crap that you read in the movie liaison magazines, the Starlogs, the Fangorias, the Premiere, all of these magazines. I started getting calls about 6 months ago, people who wanted to know if they could buy from me a copy of my script for the new Doctor Who series. I said, I have no idea what you were talking about. And they said, well, you're writing Doctor Who. I said, really? And they said, yes, we read it in a one of these. I don't even know what to call these magazines. I mean, they're not movie magazines. You know, they're like flat magazines. They are so full of crap that how you people can come to any understanding of Hollywood ever is amazing to me. In truth, what you are dealing with is a manifestation of the wonderful epigraph by a French critic called Jules Renard, and he said, writing is an occupation which you must continue to prove you have talent to people who have none of their own. And this is absolutely the truth. You'll spend a year writing a script, and then it will be sent to the creative unit. The creative unit. When I hear this, I picture a padded cell, you know, something like Arkham Asylum, with these people sitting there saying, yes, I am creative, this week I will be Napoleon. And they give you something called input. Now, in certain criminal circles, input is considered a felony. One of the things that you discover, and this is one of the absolutely ineluctable truths, is that they may offer you ideas parallel and maybe as good as what you've got, but never, ever better. Never better, just different. And usually different for reasons that defy understanding. I had a script that went through a 6-month rewrite that was like stripping the bark off a tree, because there was a scene in which the guy was put in a closet by his mother. Little did I realize that the network executive who was in charge of that project had been put in a closet by his mother. And he would never cop to it. We learned about it only later from his assistant saying, well, that's what it was all about. And I said, you mean to tell me I wasted 6 months of my life rewriting that script because this schmuck was put in a closet when he was a baby? That was what it was. It is very hard to explain to you what it is like to try and create something that makes any sense. Because invariably people who are not creators will have to put their hands in it to prove their worth. They have to prove that they're like attorneys. You send something to an attorney, they're going to find problems.
Oh, I'd have a little problem with that. I'd have said it this way.
Yeah, well, your mama. Basically, they have to do something, and this makes your life a living hell. And so being a writer in Hollywood is like working in the Egyptian house of the dead. Is that succinct enough?
I think we should hear Charlie's side of it now.
I'm not sure what side I'm dealing with right now. No, I think Harlan said it extremely well. I think that a lot of these reasons are why I've never really chosen to be involved in mainstream Hollywood. It is very depressing. It's fun. What can you say? That's the way it works. How about Peter? Peter, what do you think, Peter? What do you think?
Peter,
But you're
you worked on a lot of different sides. What do you think it is that makes it different between comics and Hollywood when you talk about the creative process? Jacob?
No. Well, the difference between comics and Hollywood is to a certain extent something of degrees, in that with Hollywood, well, let's back up. With comic books, it's you and it's the editor. And that's pretty much it. In your standard Marvel, DC, work-for-hire environment, it's you and it's the editor. And if the editor is happy with what you turn out, that's it, and you go on your merry way. There are the aspects of the artist, and whether the artist may come up with his or her own changes or differences, which ideally you work out with the artist. But nevertheless, it's pretty much you and the editor, and that's it. With Hollywood, you can get involved in so many layers of so many people who want to get involved purely because they feel that if they don't get involved, they're not doing their job. With the editor, you send the editor the material, and if it's a good editor, I have worked with good editors. I'm working with several good editors now. And these are people to whom if I send them a plot and they like it, they send it to the artist, and that's it, and they've done their job. Whereas in Hollywood, it seems almost pathologically, if not genetically impossible, for various creative entities to put their rubber stamp on a project. Not that the script or the story may necessarily need it, not that it will improve it, not that they've seen any particular flaw, but simply because they want to get their fingerprints on it so that they can say, hear that line of dialogue? That was mine. See that character who's gutted over there? I did that. It seems that to a certain degree, you are satisfying the needs of the ego rather than satisfying the needs of the story. So that to me seems the primary difference. Nice watch, movie.
At Full Moon, Charlie often refers in interviews to Full Moon as the comic books of the 90s. And I see a lot of changes happening with where comic books are going and also with where film are going. Charlie, do you think with the way things are progressing with films like The Mask, which Mike Richardson was co-producer on, with films like The Shadow, which Mike Lloyd was very involved with.
I want to talk about that. Later.
We'll give you your turn.
Later, we'll talk about it.
Do you think Hollywood will become the tail wagging the dog? Do you think there's a point coming where comics are really going to be pushing the way Hollywood's going?
No. Maybe it's not the popular answer. I think there's a big influence, but there always has been. You know, to me what's more amazing is the fact that now 8 out of the 10 top grossing films of all time are sci-fi, fantasy, and horror films. I mean, they're in the genre. And you know, it wasn't too long ago where mainstream Hollywood was not making any of these kind of pictures. Star Wars pretty much turned people around and showed the majors and showed mainstream Hollywood that there's a lot of money in them there hills. And since Star Wars, you know, these pictures are really large $100 million versions of really B movies if you think about it. And that's great. I mean, it's fueling more of what a lot of us all enjoy watching. And the comic book influence is there for sure. It's certainly there for me. I mean, I think Full Moon in a lot of ways is kind of a Marvel Comics inspired deal. All the crossovers we're doing. We're taking, our first step in the direct-to-video market, and we plan to go, beyond that. Not that we want to lose sight of what our core business is, but Hollywood functions on many different levels, and all the frustrations they're talking about are certainly there. And it's almost a miracle that a big event movie gets made and turns out well. I mean, it really is, because there are so many people involved. I mean, I've had experiences where material that I brought into people to greenlight, changes that were made had to do with just character names. I mean, people wanted literally talk about ego. They wanted their own stamp on the project. So, whereas very few suggestions were made in terms of plot or development, or it's just, let's change these guys' names, and they would suggest names. I mean, these are guys running studios or running divisions. It's that bizarre. So, I mean, the more, in-house, the more autonomous you can be, which is a luxury in this business. Of course, the better it is. But as soon as you move out of the independent world, which we operate in, then it's a world that is involving, many, many millions of dollars in many hands, all the way up and down the line. But the comic influence is there for sure, real big, And I think there's almost a reverse effect happening, where it's going back and forth to where all of this material, video games, comics, trading cards, music, interactive, films, I mean, it's really becoming the same cut of cloth. And so many of these images are, to me, looking so similar. Not that that's necessarily bad, but it's all becoming one just incredibly colorful blur. It's like, but that's another conversation. I get sidetracked. But Harlan had something he wanted to say. I
I want to talk about The Mask.
Shadow.
Shadow.
In 1955, if I'm not mistaken the year, the films that were up for the Academy Award were Sunset Boulevard, All About Eve, Born Yesterday, I think On the Waterfront.
1950.
I'm sorry?
1950.
50 cent? 50. Whatever.
40 years ago.
This year, did we really need a Flintstones movie? Did we really need Home Alone 2? Did we really need Last Action Hero and its sequel, True Lies? I grew up on The Shadow. I'm 60 years old. I listened to The Shadow, not on reruns like a lot of you. I heard it first run. I loved The Shadow, man. I loved it. I was on this stupid cruise with my wife. I was on this wonderful cruise with my wife. We got a freebie, and I went on this boat full of altar cockers. And we were walking to dinner, and I said, who are all these old farts? And she said, people your age, stupid. And they had, it was a mystery cruise. There was a murder, and I was the guest author and all that kind of thing. And they had a panel show, and you had a name of the most. It was like a Family Feud. You have to name the most. Survey says the most famous radio detective. So all of these people, they were even younger than I was. They were like young farts of 50 or so, and they're putting down, a Sam Spade or Sherlock Holmes or Nero Wolfe, and the Shadow, man. I mean, the Shadow was the detective, and that was the answer, of course. And I wanted to write the Shadow movie so goddamn bad. I wanted to write it back when I came into Hollywood. I was working at Screen Gems, and it had been bought by William Castle, and I was working down the hall, and I would have written that thing for nothing. Absolutely for nothing. I'd have paid him to let me write it. He gave it to a guy named Jimmy Sangster, a British writer, nice guy, good writer, but didn't understand the Shadow, and he never gave me anything. And for the next 35 years, they tried to make scripts out of the Shadow, so now it's getting made. It gets made, and I thought, oh, okay, I didn't get it. I'm gonna love this. I'm gonna love this. The first movie I ever saw in my life was Victor Jory in The Shadow. It was a serial, Victor Jory as The Shadow. It was a Lake Theater in Painesville, Ohio, man. First at 10 years old, 9 years old, I saw it. I wanted, and said, I'm gonna love this movie. I went to see The Shadow. It's not, the special effects are absolutely spectacular. They're wonderful. Other than that, it is the dumbest, most boring piece of shit ever put on film. How can you make The Shadow boring, man? How can you do that? And I sat there and my heart just died. And it died because the people who made it, you're gonna love this, those of you under the age of senescence, it was made by young shitheads. It was made by people who are baby boomers, who grew up on television. The plot makes no sense. The characters make no sense. What that goddamn refugee from Woodstock at the beginning with Alec Baldwin with the long hair is supposed to be, I don't understand any of that. It makes no sense, not just from scene to scene, but from line of dialogue to line of dialogue. I mean, here's Shiwan Khan, who in the early stages of this movie appears, boom, out of the blue, in the Shadow's secret sanctorum. Here he is, and the Shadow says to him, how did you find your way in here? And Shiwan Khan laughs at him and says, I can find my way into your mind as easily as this hidden chamber. Really? Then why all through the picture with the Shadow fucking around with him? Doesn't he just appear and off him? Because the people who wrote it don't understand that a story has to have internal logic. That even if it's a comic book, it has to have internal logic. It has to make sense. And they didn't do that. They didn't do it at all, and they broke my heart, and I will never forgive them for this. And I look at this movie, and apart from the fact that it's obviously made by people who are too damn young to understand what a story is, they weren't brought up on books or comics or anything. They were brought up on TV. And TV is non-parsing. It don't go. It skip logic. People can act like Dagwood Bumpstead, and you accept it. They can act like absolute blithering morons, and you accept it because it's a sitcom. But when I see a movie in which the Shadow and Shiwan Khan fall off a building and they land on a gargoyle, and the Shadow says, next time you can be on top, I say, these are people who grew up on the kind of humor, the adolescent, bullshit, semi-macho crap that you see in James Bond movies. Where he's attacked by a thug, and he hits him with a bailing hook, and it carries him up, and he's got the hook sticking out of his throat, and someone says, what happened to Igor? Oh, he's hanging around. That's what they do, because that's what they think is humor. And I gotta tell you that kind of translations of comic books, or things that are peripherally aligned to comic books, like old-time radio shows or TV sitcoms, stuff like that, is the death of film, because it's the dumbing down of that. And comics ain't always stupid. A lot of the time, comics are real sharp.
Well said. And that brings me to my point, which is to bring out to the audience. What would you guys, we got a man who makes movies, we got a man who writes movies. We got a man who
Writes
plays the movies, acts in movies, writes the movies, whatever we let him get away with. What would you like to see? What comic book, what concept
I
would you
wanna
like to see?
I want to see Laser Blast 2. I've been waiting 15 years. Laser Blast 2.
I don't know what to say about that. Laser Blast was seriously shot over 3 weekends 20 years ago.
Just think what you could do with it
I
now.
know. An
6
extra
weekends.
weekend in there we could. No, but you know, it was actually fun releasing that movie. I mean, making it before Star Wars came out, so it was a little precursor. And the effects, Dave Allen's effects were cool, the little lizard guys. But back then, when I first met Dave Allen, this wonderful effects wizard who we've been working with now for many, many years, he had a project called The Primevals, which he was trying to get off the ground. And he had been trying already for, I think, 8 years before I met Dave, 20 years ago. And I'm happy to say we're finally shooting it as we speak. It's being shot, and it's going to be about 1.5 years of post-production. It's got like 400 stop-motion animation shots in it. But yeah, it's finally happening. So apropos, at least, Laser Blast, Dave Allen, were happening with that picture. So that's good.
And we got a critter from Primevals in the booth, so come by and see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the movies I'd like to see is Wolfenberg, comes written by Bat and Lash and illustrated by him. He created a series. It would be an excellent comic or even a TV series. Well, comic book would be an excellent TV series or a movie. Something to make a series.
I'll help out too, Static from Milestone, and also, because we got the right up here, how about Atlantis Chronicles, the movie?
We can't even get Atlantis Chronicles to trade paperback here.
So what movie would you like to take and play with, Peter?
What movie would I like to take in film?
Yeah, and what comic book would you like to
Well,
play?
I'd like to do a Doc Savage movie and do it right.
That's a bum rap.
No, the George Powell.
George Powell did a good
The George Powell movie had its fun moments, but it's not. It was incredibly self-indulgent in the campy aspects that seemed to be the only way that you could do anything that was comic related.
During that time, that's
Right.
George's trade-off
Right.
at the time. But it's not a bad film. It's not a bad
It depends what you're up for. I mean, the last time I saw a Doc Savage movie was at a Worldcon some years back, and I came in and they were up to the point in the Doc Savage movie where he's just explained to Mona why he can't ever commit to a woman. And she
Mona,
says,
you're a brick?
And he says, Mona, you're a brick. And what was great was that when she says, I understand, Doc, and the whole audience kind of like trembled with anticipation. And the audience is going, here it comes. You could hear it going through the crowd, and Doc says, Mona, you're a brick. And chucks her on the chin like that, and everyone goes, yay! It was fun, but it wasn't what I wanted to see. Just as with Shadow wasn't what you wanted to see. And I would just like to see it done, I don't know, a bit less condescendingly than it was done. So that's one thing that I would like to see. Let's see. I'd like to see a Hulk movie, which I know that they're working on. My understanding is that they're going to be doing computer graphics to do the Hulk, which should be interesting. I mean, I really don't think that a guy in green body makeup is going to work on a screen.
Well, they got morphing techniques now. They don't have to.
Exactly. They got the morphing techniques.
That's what I said.
Right. When I disagree with you, you give me grief.
No.
When I agree with you, you give me grief.
I'm only being puckish.
Fuck you. Let's see.
Well, I'll tell you something that's been lost and forgotten for most people, and that's the serials of the 30s and 40s. You talked about them a little bit with The Shadow, and I guess to a degree they were the precursor of television, and I think there's some comic book, there's something in there that crossed over well with comics, but I think that we're wide open, hopefully with an intelligent retelling or adaptation or just beginning fresh with the concept of a feature-length serial. I mean, I wasn't a kid back then, you were, and I know how cool it was and how much anticipation there was in going to the movies, not so much for the A-feature, but for that 15-minute short that left you hanging. And these were really brutal cliffhangers. Today with television, the way they've homogenized everything goes to a mix master. You can't really do that anymore. You don't see that happening anymore. But I mean, you're around there, living that experience, and I think there's something untapped, and I'm not sure whether it's comics or movies or something that you know, can be a premiere situation, direct to video or television, but the serials were, I mean, for those of you who see it on video at least, they're fantastic. They're great. What do you think about the serials? I mean, that's
Well, when we had lunch, we talked about it. We were having lunch, and Charlie was talking about this, and I said, would it be a wonderful thing if you could do a 12, 13 episode serial, shoot it all at once, and then release it on 15-minute cassettes, one a week, and have people join a club, join the Full Moon Serial Club, and every Saturday your film would arrive, and you could watch your chapter. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be sensational? What a great idea. And then he talked to me about the marketing of it, and I said, yeah, well, I took care of that idea.
No, but there's something in there for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely, well, Indiana Jones, you know, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's what it is. It's a Saturday morning serial, done brilliantly.
Yeah. But, you know, episodic TV, which wants to be just that, never works, of course. And no one's ever done anything, I think, quite like Indiana Jones. Capture that flavor.
No. Well, that's because television has to be homogenized. Everybody's always worried about polluting the minds of the youth. Little they realize that they were polluted about 40 years ago. There were incipient axe murderers sitting in this very audience. Just take them to a 7-Eleven.
Question, some questions in the audience, we just people want to know.
We'll open it up to questions.
Sure. I'm sorry, what?
This is kind of a large encompassing question that I'd like everybody's input on. It seems to me that we have a lot of films being released lately that are based upon TV shows, based upon comic books, based upon, you know, radio serials, sadly or not. Is this? It seems to me, in my opinion, it seems to me that's kind of a tragic loss, where we cannot create anything truly original for ourselves. We have to fall back upon nostalgia, or in the case of, like, you know, The Shadow, on a retroactive nostalgia, because it certainly isn't part of my experience or anybody else that I know of. And I would like your opinion upon that. Why is it that we have to fall back on stuff that has already been done rather than creating our own stuff? You know?
Well, I'll start out, but of course everybody else. Charlie, what is it? 200 films a year, maybe?
Well, it's more actually. Mainstream Hollywood.
Mainstream Hollywood, about 200? 200 films a year produced in Hollywood, mainstream films. How many screenplays do you think are written in a year? Take a guess. Take a wild guess.
A wild guess?
Yeah.
$100,000.
1,000? 2,000? 3,000? How many?
20,000?
About 20,000.
Yeah.
20,000 screenplays a year. Many of them get bought. Many of them get bought. And many of them sit on shelves. Sitting on shelves at this very moment in studios are scripts by Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Eric Maria Remarque, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Horace McCoy, who wrote They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Now you say, well, yeah, but they got to be lousy films, right? They got to be, or they've been shot. Really? You mean they're worse than Porky's Revenge? You mean the worst film that Scott Fitzgerald could have written in his most drugged out, you know, drunken state is not as good as Police Academy 5? What you are talking about is an industry. It's what Judith, not Judith, Chris, yeah, was it Judith? No, it was Judith, I think it was Judith Chris, the film critic, who said, Hollywood is an art form run by businessmen. And the problem there is that originality is not a shoe-in. A shoe-in is Batman Returns. A shoe-in is The Little Rascals. A shoe-in is let's take Julia Roberts and get her stooked off camera, you know, by Nick Nolte. That's, or whoever. That's a shoe-in. Originality is a crapshoot. They're not in the business for crapshoots. They're in the business to make money. You delude yourselves into thinking that these are artists. They are not. Schmucks like me who sit and complain about this kind of stuff, we are like flies buzzing against a window pane. They tolerate us, you know, oh yeah, he can write well, but you know, can he really turn in a good Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry? it is sad. It's absolutely sad that the paucity of imagination is demonstrated by Hollywood is what prevails. But then the same paucity of imagination prevails in comic books. Look at how many Marvel titles, look at how many Valiant titles, look at how many Image titles, look at how many DC titles are nothing but the same chewed over, remasticated crap that you've been reading for the last 25 years. And every time they want to be smart about it, they say, well, we got to do something important. Let's make Green Lantern a teenage asshole. Hey, we didn't think of that one. That's why when a Paul Chadwick comes along with a Concrete, or the guy who writes Zombie comes along and does a book like that, or Neil Gaiman comes along with a Sandman, your eyeballs fall out of your head because the potential of the field is then seen. The same for movies. I mean, you all got your favorite movies. I mean, mine are films like The Train and Seconds. I mean, these are great films. And when they talk about science fiction films, they always say, what's your favorite science fiction? I say Seconds. They say, what? I say, or Charlie. Charlie, but Charlie's not science fiction. Why not? Because it hasn't got a goofy robot in it? There ain't an awful lot of imagination in the world. There's a lot of people trying to earn a living, and they do it the best way they can with mediocrity. As Sturgeon said, 90% of everything is shit, meaning 90% of everything is at best mediocre. That's the way the world is run. If you struggle for that 10%, you will be shrieking in the wilderness, and you will die a noble fool. I know.
The other aspect of it, Hollywood, is that it seems to me that the main thing that people are out to do, that the studio executives are out to do, is cover their ass. When they are investing 30, 40 million, whatever, in a picture, if the film tanks at the box office, they want to be able to turn to their hires up and say, well, based on the gross of the previous movie in this series, and based on the grosses of the star of this movie should have done well. Therefore, it's not my fault.
It's the writer's fault.
It's the writer's fault. If a movie does well, it's the director's work. If the movie is a bomb, it's the writer's fault. This is a truism that you should always remember. So it's really the whole thing about Hollywood is just everybody's trying to make sure that if the ship goes down, they've got the umbrella over their head so that they can make sure that somebody else gets tainted with it, because whenever there's a bomb, somebody's looking to point the finger, and people just want to make sure that they've got their focus groups, that they've got everything in place to say, here's all the reasons I make the decision. If it didn't work out, it's not my fault.
Well, as somebody who makes decisions, and Charlie, I know you don't make every movie that you look at, of course. The nice thing about Full Moon is the concepts come from Charlie, but what do you do when you see something you want to do?
Well, I just want to give my own take, which is not too dissimilar to Harlan's and Peter's, because we wanted all three of us to answer this. First of all, filmmakers don't run any of the major companies anymore. So, years ago, you had people who were pretty passionate about what they were greenlighting, and I think a lot more risks were taken. Today, there's all sorts of marketing surveys, and not to mention the fact that you have these huge investments in the theory, which probably is proven out by some analysis that someone figured out, is that if you have a pre-sold audience, if the audience that you need to somehow bring into the movie theater is aware of the concept, or has already, whether it's a sequel or it's a former TV show, the theory is, well, okay, they're going to buy it easier than something, it's easier for us to sell it than something that no one's ever heard of. What a marketing challenge to market a film called Forrest Gump. The title alone is, if you would have asked me, and I'm kind of into titles, what do you think of this title, Forrest Gump? I'd say, well, that's going to be a tough one.
They thought it was. They thought they were going to dump it.
Oh no, I know. Well, to give you an idea,
Originally, it was going to be called Robo-Gump.
But to give you an idea of how bizarre that was, because we're distributed by Paramount, at least in terms of home video. Their merchandising division, and they're very capable people over there. They could not sell anything. Nothing. They couldn't get a candy company to sign up. Of course, now everyone's jumping into this. And it's so much of the midnight hour that they're not going to get what they could have gotten if anybody with some foresight had seen this picture. And whether you're a fan of the film or not, it just goes to show you that something new and different and fresh and original can work. But still, these companies all need the blockbuster. blockbusters. They need to make those $100 million domestic grossers. And the theory is, if you do something that we've all kind of felt and seen before, and it's a sequel, or it's borrowed from, or it's inspired by, there's a better chance. And of course, pictures come along every year that totally disprove that theory. So, for whatever it's worth, it takes a lot of courage to go out there and to do something that is different, fresh, and original, because there's a certain higher degree of failure. I mean, it's not so much just the mediocrity. I mean, you look at something that's a sequel or something that people are somewhat familiar with, and it's true. If you just look at the numbers, there's in theory a built-in audience. Now, of course, the pictures of Turkey, and most of these pictures are really bad. I mean, we've just talked about it. These are really bad movies, and it's amazing to think that a picture like Last Action Hero, that cost really over $100 million, a picture like that gets made because you look at what it was and who it was appealing to, and you got to wonder, did anyone ever think this thing through? But the people who run the studios are accomplished businessmen. They're not filmmakers.
One wonders what they perceive to be the audience. Do they really think of people who go to movies as Shakma baboons? I mean, you see it. You pay to see it. I go to a lot of screenings. I do film criticism, so I get to see almost everything for nothing. And even at those prices, there's a lot. I sit there and I say, what possessed anyone to actually want to make this movie?
It's patent.
Yeah, it's can you? I mean, there's a movie this week that we got a pass to. It's this movie with a seal in it. There's a kid and a seal. Now,
Free Pinky. Jump, Pinky, jump!
I think there is a need for family films, absolutely. But these lachrymose substitutions of Lassie for various other species, seem to me to be a dead end. I mean, it's like, oh, my pet ant ran away next, or, oh my God, my jumping frog from Calaveras is lost.
I'm still picturing the seal on a farm going, where's it, Timmy?
Timmy's in the well.
Let's go, Pinky, lead the way.
And I look at this stuff when the invitations come in, and I show it, and Susan and I stand there, we open the mail, we look and say, this one, and she says, not in this lifetime. You want to chain me and drag me? Yeah, I'll go. And I say, no, it's not. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they perceive of the audience as being. I do know that writers over the age of 30, 31 can't get hired. They won't talk to them.
Judy Price has just declared she won't.
Say what?
Judy Price at CBS has just declared she isn't going to work with anybody older, but Michael Reeves. Anybody older?
There's a wonderful book out called A Martian Wouldn't Say That. And it consists entirely of memos from TV vice presidents. And one of the memos is, contrary to your accusations, there is no age discrimination in the hiring of writers at this network. We have a number of writers in their late 30s.
Christy was just saying that Judy Price at CBS has announced that she will no longer work with any writers over the age of 30.
I don't know specifically 30, but
not specifically 30. I mean, if you put a little Grecian formula in, you can maybe make it to 32 or 33. This is insanity.
She wants young, hot.
Young, hot people who have tabula rasa. They absolutely have no brains in their heads at all. It's very, very hard. I work, but that's only because there are people in that town with a death wish, and so I keep working. But all around me, I see Academy Award winners who can't get hired. They simply can't get hired. And the classic story, and I don't know, did you hear it about Billy Wilder, or was it the woman from Gilligan's Island? What was her name? No, the older woman, Natalie Shaver.
Thank God, that was the last.
It's told variously. The story is told variously. I heard it about Billy Wilder, but I understand that it actually happened to Natalie Shaver, who played Jim Backus's wife on Gilligan's Island. And the story goes that Wilder is called in by some hot young exec at HBO, who says, somebody says to me, you really ought to get Billy Wilder's at Liberty. Get Billy Wilder to direct one of these HBO movies. What a coup. So this guy, a hot 33-year-old, says, yeah, that'd be great, bring him in here. So Billy Wilder is there anyone in this audience who does not know Billy Wilder? I mean, raise your hand.
Be kind.
Two of you. Okay, Billy Wilder is a 3-time Academy Award winner. Among the films that he produced and directed and co-wrote are things like The Apartment, Some Like It Hot, Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard. I mean, we're talking here a major, major talent at Liberty. So he goes in to see this schmuck, and the guy keeps him sitting in the anteroom for half an hour, which is already demeaning. And when he comes in, he stands up and he shakes his hand and he sits Billy Wilder down and he says, well, we're very excited to have you here. He said, now I'm a little fuzzy on some of your credits. Could you fill me in on some of your credits? And Billy Wilder stands up and in his Bavarian accent says, you first, kid. And turns around and walks out. That's what it's like to work in Hollywood.
Well, we could spend 1,000 hours talking about these kind of stories.
That's a great story. Now, being that you're dealing with it, because I look at this side too, you kind of would think that, you know, in the country of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Okay, can't you, like, convince an idiot producer just on his own level, just do, like, if you want
We don't know enough one-syllable words.
No, I mean...
You don't remember the story in Kingdom of the Blind, do you?
Well,
You know what happened to the one-eyed man?
Yeah, he was...
They tormented him and drove him crazy until, you know, he finally ran away.
No, but
No, but okay. You won't take yes for an answer, will you?
No, that's correct. But say you want to do a project and you just say, okay, well, whatever. Just take, for instance, say like you want to revive the Green Hornet. Let's say The Shadow did well. And you go to the producer and say, well, the Green Hornet will do well because The Shadow did well. Or the Green Hornet will do well because Batman did well. Or the Green Hornet will do well because
Yeah, what's your point?
The Dragon did well.
What's your point?
Well,
Then you got a Green Hornet movie.
well, I'm just using that as an example, but try to get your things through by playing their own games with them.
This is the last thing I will say on this panel, I promise you. Stupidity you can beat by outsmarting it. Arrogance you can beat by appealing to the arrogance of it. You can go around it, through it, over it, you can outwit them. Stupidity melded with arrogance is unassailable. You can't go through it, around it, over it, under it. All yours, guys. All yours, guys.
Unless, of course, you own your own movie production company and you make B movies direct to video.
Well, you know, there is one thing to take heart about. You know, what we're talking about now is mainstream Hollywood, which more and more is moving towards attempting to create these blockbuster films that will be released in 2,000 to 3,000 screens. And there's a lot more, you know, in the entertainment superhighway coming up here than just, you know, going to your local movie theater. Not to demean that experience, because when it's right, you know, it's great. But there's tremendous opportunity for filmmakers who don't necessarily have to work in that system. You know, whether it's direct-to-video, whether it's cable, whether it's all sorts of different alternative delivery systems, which are, you know, about to, you know, be sprung on us, because we're just beginning to see how pictures are going to be delivered in the future. And I'm not saying necessarily this is all going to be desktop movie making, but it's getting close. I mean, not too many years ago when I started off, and I wanted a good score for one of my movies, I'd have to not only find a talented composer, but he would have to go into an expensive studio and at least hire 30 musicians and sometimes double up. And that's how a score was done. And today, for a fraction of those dollars, the same talented composer, you know, can in his home or her home put together a pretty remarkable score, you know, with stuff that can fit on this table. So, you know, filmmaking in a way is heading in that direction. And even though I also aspire to do things beyond just the direct-to-video movies, for budgets that are generally under $2 million, we've now made 60 movies over the last 7 years. We work completely autonomously. We have a relationship with Paramount. They release, you know, we deliver, we create marketing campaigns, and it's been a good one. And even though it's relatively unique in the business, it's worked really well, and we're going to move into some television now, hopefully really good television, and on occasion a picture that may have some theatrical potential. But I think there's a future for people who are into filmmaking that is, I think, very exciting, because again, 20 years ago when I started, I mean, none of this was around. You only thought theatrical. That was the only destiny of your movie was theatrical. And today, the entertainment pie has already got so many pieces. You got theatrical and video and pay-per-view and cable and syndication and foreign and satellite and laserdisc, and it goes on and on.
Yeah, I think Harlan wrote a good point when he talked about the rehashing, especially with family film. This summer we've got both Lassie and Black Beauty again, and it's showing a lack of originality. And
They both were huge bombs, by the way, which is interesting to take note of. I mean, no one went to see those pictures.
With Full Moon Entertainment, even though you're not making A+ films or anything like that, I mean, you come up with a hell of a lot of ideas. You yourself, and at least they're semi-original.
Talk about crazy with faint dams. Left-handed compliment of darkness.
I accept the compliment and I accept the word semi, because let's face it, I mean, what is truly... We got all sorts of crossovers planned, but no, I appreciate that. And I mean, what's the point in doing it the other way anyway? I mean, I don't want to kind of, serve up the same sort of stuff that everyone's doing. I mean, I'd hate to have to make an erotic thriller. That would be a curse worse than death. I mean, why is it? This is another weird deal, because I go abroad, we sell our pictures offshore. In this country, there's this bizarre thing happening. Maybe it's kind of ending now, but there was a lot of popularity where you combine erotic scenes with scenes of people getting cut up. I mean, it's an amazing thing. It is the strangest combination. When you talk to people about erotic films, in this country especially, at least I'm talking about more movie buyers, not necessarily the public, they say, oh, you mean erotic thrillers, which really, that message is. And I say, no, how about a real erotic film that's, intelligent, that's erotic, and has no violence? Can you believe that? No one's getting cut up. So I keep turning on whatever, cable, and I keep seeing a scene where beautiful people are doing something romantic or erotic, and the very next scene, someone's got a knife and they're getting stalked or something. It's very weird.
And Joe Esterhaus gets millions of dollars to rewrite the same script for every film.
Well, lucky Joe.
I would assume that part of the problem with rehashing is that we've all been asking so much money, the budget's gotten so big that anything is a risk. So you have a better advantage as a lower budget film. They can leave you alone. So I would ask, as a would-be aging screenwriter, what are you doing to open the door for people that want to pitch something? You don't need a lot of money necessarily, just want to...
Our door is so wide open, it's amazing. I mean, luckily, first we can't really afford to develop in the sense that we like to develop the scripts we're going to shoot. We don't want to just, shove them out too quickly, but earlier on, Harlan was talking about these 20,000 scripts, or it's probably even more. God knows everyone has a script. I mean, that to me is, you think everyone's a director. Far more writers than directors, because everybody has got a script. But, we're always looking, especially now that we're into this wonderful field, which has been a passion for me as dating back many years. We are looking for ways to involve writers, and some of the writers who are involved with us are people who have huge credits, who have gotten a lot of money to write scripts, and one of the attractions is at least we make the movies. It's a novel concept. We write the script and we actually make the movie. It doesn't sit on the shelf. I mean, the frustration of thousands of wonderful scripts getting tied up in this development mill, it's got to be, that is the frustration for creative people working in the mainstream. I know great directors, effects guys, writers who are just, they do it because maybe once every 2 years they snare something that's a lot of money. These are people who want to work all the time. And the studio system 30, 40 years ago was terrific. You had contract players, you had people in all fields of craft who were involved with a program. If it was an art director, they weren't waiting for their manager or agent to call and maybe doing one big gig a year and then getting depressed. They knew they had 7, 8, 9 films to deal with. They were working on one, they were designing another. There was not to mention a camaraderie and everything. Those were exciting times. And I know we'll never go back to those, even though in our little world we're trying to create something not too dissimilar. But the doors are certainly open. We're here.
I'd like to see a program where you might piggyback a veteran writer with a new one.
I hate that word veteran. I mean, my father's 70 years old. He's currently line producing Primevals. We talked about it a while ago. What's this veteran thing? I mean, you know, if you're able and you're talented, you're there. I mean,
I didn't say out of it. I said someone who knows what they're doing to help somebody.
Okay.
Because what's tough for new screenwriters is we have to have a complete script to show. I had several. The problem is new screenwriters don't have enough experience to do a good full script. The real experience comes in doing rewrites with other people on other scenes. You know, they may have a good scene, they have to bury it within some other spec script. I don't want to bury myself by saying something wrong.
Gee, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I particularly agree with that. The way that I hooked up with Full Moon was that I wrote a number of spec scripts. One of them found its way to Charlie. Charlie read the script and said, well, we don't want to produce this because Full Moon is for producing the movies that Charlie comes up with, but wow, this is a good script. This guy can write. Let's get him the hell in here and talk about things that we'd like to have him do. And that's, you know, that's how I wound up working for Full Moon. So it's not like, you know, I mean, saying that, well, gee, you know, you can't have a good first draft. It must, a first draft only comes from rewrites. I'm sure that there are many executives who will agree with you on that, but I don't think that's any kind of necessarily hard and fast rule. If you produce a spec script and it's a solid script, it will get you work. You don't write spec scripts to get those scripts produced.
What's a spec script?
What?
Speculative, on speculation.
Right, that somebody hasn't commissioned you to, you know, and paid you to do.
It's almost like an example of your work.
Exactly, that's what
it
it's
gets
for.
picked up, that's great, but otherwise, at least it's a calling card. You walk in, someone says, hey, this guy can write. We have the project, we'd like him to write. Or you get incredibly lucky and someone loves your specific, you know, script, your spec script, and that's, sometimes you read about $2 million being paid to some guy who's just, you know, just got lucky.
Yeah, but that's the rarity. Much more often is that the spec script will simply lead to meetings. They're real good at meetings, and they even lead to work. But the odds of you turning in a script that's so sensational that they say, quick, 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 get Spielberg on the phone, oh my God, let's get this into production immediately, that's is the much more rare animal.
What I'm more interested in for Harlan, that do you believe that the edge gone out of movie making today has been like 20 years ago, where like the Saturday morning classic, the Saturday afternoon classics going to the movie theater stuff? And do you think that the media and everything's been more downtoned and the violence is more planned on? Like, in fact, White Wolf this year will be releasing Worlds of Darkness on TV with Aaron Spelling as the executive producer, and they're always cutting down the violence level on the script. They haven't even seen half the script that was produced. They've always said the Eddie Simpson Bureau is good. They've always sung its tooth and claw into
I lost your question in there somewhere.
what do you think?
Yeah, it must have been I kind of went.
Like the thriller edge of like, you know, Saturday afternoon matinees you go to, like reruns and stuff.
Well, we talk Saturday matinees, and we're talking 40 years ago, not 20.
But still, you see reruns nowadays on like the
Yeah.
cable and stuff.
Yeah, I got the question. I'm trying to figure out a way to get it. This is a very complex question because it straddles the line between art and commerce. The liaison between art and commerce has ever been a shaky one, a difficult one, an accommodation, all the way back to the Agora, when philosophers sold their ideas and had patrons. You try and find, I don't know how to answer your question, man. I really don't. Have they lost the edge? Yeah, I think they lost it a long time ago. I think television did. I really consider television the most invidious, monstrous invention ever foisted on the human race. It is the absolute perfect dope. It's a narcotic. It's exactly what it is. Absolutely, it is always there when you need it to give you a fix, 24 hours a day, ever refurbishing, ever different. You can just fix on it, you can sit there. I mean, look at our body types in this room. Human beings are not built this way, folks. You got this way from sitting there and stuffing shit in your kissers while you were watching TV. That's what it's from. TV has, it is one of the...
I'll hold him down, you sit on him.
I can say all manner of things to seek your approbation. I don't really try that, as you clearly know. I'm telling you what I perceive, and I may be just an old cranky fart. That may well be the truth. I mean, I despise rap music. When I hear some black dude tell me how this is great ghetto art, I say, fuck you. Go read Anna Bontemps. Read Langston Hughes. That's ghetto poetry. That's black poetry. Not some asshole talking baby need back. You know, but that's where everybody finds their roots where they want. And if you're 20 years old or you're 17 years old and you never knew anything different, and you put someone down in front of even, I don't know, Lawrence of Arabia, and they grew up on nothing but you know, Nightmare on Elm Street, for Christ's sake, they're going to say, what the fuck is this? What am I looking at? I went to in LA to Kurosawa's film Durzu Usala, which I think is one of the greatest films ever made. There were 3 people in the audience, me and 2 other people, and 2 of them got up and walked out. I was literally the only person in the movie theater. This wasn't a screening. It was in a new movie theater. Nobody could apparently wanted to watch it because it did not go boom, boom. There was not a car crash every 7 minutes. It's a leisurely, quiet, gorgeous to look upon film about the human condition. Have they lost the edge? The edge was lost a long time ago, Jack. We are gumming art now. Like this.
Harlan, the film is such a shithole. What are you doing at Babylon 5?
Well, was that Gil that asked that?
No.
Who is that that asked that? Yeah, oh, I see. Well, now, first of all, you asked me a non sequitur. You asked me a non sequitur. If Hollywood is such a, if Rasputin was such a monster who murdered people, what the fuck are you doing wearing a beard? Okay, the one thing has nothing to do with the other. I work in Hollywood, and I work the best way I can. I work with, the best projects I can. Last week I turned down $250,000 to do a Kenny Rogers science fiction western.
Harlan, who made that offer again?
The offer was made to me by Bob Cosberg of Goober Peters. I didn't have any trouble saying no to that. I work on Babylon 5, first of all, because Joe Straczynski is one of the most decent, wonderful people I know. I like the series. There's no amount of money in this life that could get me to work on Lois and Clark.
Oh, wait a minute.
Alan Brenner quit this week because he couldn't stand the other goddamn producer. He quit. The other producer's a shithead, apparently. Oh, here I go. My wife is saying, "Oh God, you're doing it again." Yeah. I never said that. I never said that. I'm just reporting the scuttlebutt I hear. There's a lot of stuff I will not do. There's no amount of money in the world can make me do. I don't ever very much do anything for money. I mean, money is what they pay me because I do what I do well, and that's fine. I work on Babylon 5 because I like the show, I like the people, I like Joe a lot, and I'm the conceptual consultant, which means I'm like a gadfly. I go around and I say, gee, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had something like Judge Wapner on the show? And so we have ombuds. The way you asked the question, I must say, was intended to be, you thought, provocative. Instead, it was merely insulting, and I hope you don't do that again. You're too old to behave that way. Ask someone else.
I would like to reinforce what you said on the quality of the audiences and how it's going downhill. I hear from people in studios in England, in Japan, major studios are closing down because they can't sell their movies. And just overall, the French movie industry is in doldrums, as you know.
Yeah.
And they're putting out major quality movies, but unfortunately, the audiences are not there, and they're all seduced by the special effects and all this computer-generated art that we produce out of here and the junk, and that's what you get.
You're right.
So if you want to make money, you know where your money is. Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the problem becomes that expectations are at a certain level, and unfortunately, they're the wrong level. Every so often, a movie will manage to sneak in and actually become a popular success, despite the fact that by all odds it shouldn't, like Forrest Gump. Actually, I haven't seen.
You know, you want to say, they pulled back the script of the next James Bond film, GoldenEye, last week. They put the project on hiatus. You know why? Because the special effects, the crashes, the car crashes, were too similar to the ones in True Lies.
Regarding the digital revolution, do you think in some ways it could possibly help what we're talking about rather than hurt it? For example, with Forrest Gump, they created Vietnam in North Carolina. If we can, eliminate. if you can use this digital technology to say eliminate a lot of very expensive shoots that are on location and do things on set and create really outlandish worlds or places that simply we couldn't afford to do for a big budget, because once this technology comes down to earth a little bit, I mean, True Lies cost what, $100-something million, but at some point this is all going to start to become a bit cheaper, and when it does, maybe it can improve things.
Well, these are all great tools that has little to do with making good movies, but they are tools that hopefully people with talent will use. And again, back to what I said earlier, you know, we're really addressing mainstream Hollywood and all this frustration and all these stories. There's no limit to things that I've heard over 20 years. But you know, it shouldn't be that depressing, because I think there are going to be delivery systems and ways in which we can look. You talked about the Kurosawa movie. Okay, well, it was probably a mistake to release that movie theatrically. I mean, even though it probably should have been seen on a big screen. But I know there are people who love that picture, and maybe they love it on Laserdisc or whatever. But I'm saying it's a different world, and maybe the masses are more into these big special effects films. And the gentleman from France, I assume he's from France, talked about how, talked about how, you know, American films, which are now have been for years actually, the most popular films worldwide. I mean, the film business is down in France, it's down in Italy. I mean, years ago we had great Italian films, French films. They occasionally surface, and they are being made, but they no longer appeal to the worldwide audience. And only our films do. I mean, this is a big, big industry. And I mean, when Hollywood produces, I don't think it's fair to say all these mainstream movies are all bad. I mean, when Hollywood produces a great mainstream film or a great effects film, I mean, there's nothing that comes close. I mean, it's still the best you can see. And it's just unfortunate so many bad ones have to come along before you see that one good one that everyone talks about. But yes, those technologies are going to help. They will help.
I mean, you're talking about French films before. I can't help but think of a film like Film Nikita, which was such a superb film, and people in America would be reluctant to see because you have to read the subtitles. Yeah. So instead they make an almost shot-by-shot remake of it that added nothing in particular to it, with an American cast.
Well, you know, that to me is the worst. That's worse than sequels, worse than TV shows. When they take a great movie and make it bad, you know.
The Vanishing was a case in point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a superb movie, and they turned it here into crap completely.
Yeah.
Well, you know why they can't have film? 1 out of every 5 Americans cannot read. Therefore, 1 out of every 5 Americans could not go to the film, so they're not going to show a film with subtitles.
I came in a little late, so maybe you covered this already, but tell me. I hear you saying that there's a sort of a whole structure there where it's controlled by businessmen, not artists, and so you can't really get something with an artistic vision made because it's run by accountants. Now maybe I'm wrong, but this isn't like some totalitarian state, and there's freedom for people like Charles Band to be out there doing something. But Charles Band said, I'm talking about mainstream Hollywood. Are we excluding the indies? The independent film didn't do the right thing. Wasn't that written by the guy who directed it, and it was an independent effort? Aren't there independent films out there? Robert Townsend's
I'm not putting
Hollywood
on the
Shuffle.
contrary. I'm real excited about the independent world, but it's apples and oranges. There's just two different worlds. And sometimes they collide, and it's awfully nice. And a small independent film is picked up and it comes out theatrically and it becomes a big hit. But those are like once a year maybe. Otherwise, there is mainstream Hollywood the way that mainstream Hollywood functions, and then there's independent filmmaking. And independent filmmaking is just a different world.
Well, where are you from?
Excuse me?
Where are you from?
Oh, we're independent. We have nothing to do with mainstream. I mean, in the case of domestic home video, we're distributed by Paramount. That's a distribution deal. We're using their distribution apparatus to ship and collect money, basically. But we are independent because we find ways of funding our pictures and working, independently of the mainstream system.
So independent is where the freedom to do what
sure.
the accountants won't let you do.
Yeah,
is where it's at.
it's not black and white. I mean,
There is freedom.
But there is freedom. But again, this is, as Harlan was talking about, this is commerce too. And we're talking about pictures in our league that are generally $1.5 to $2 million movies, and the average studio film today is $30 million, and that doesn't include marketing costs. I mean, it's an interesting playing field when you think of the disparity. So, no, independent filmmaking is very exciting, and it's going to, in a way, with the tools we were talking about earlier, potentially become not so much cheaper, but you'll be able to do more and more, for almost the same dollars, and that opens up a lot of possibilities.
It's a hopeful man.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Can I I'm sitting here, maybe, I'm not sure whether this is a good thought or a bad thought. It's just sort of forming in my head. I don't think I've ever thought this before. It's probably heretical to say this, but I think great movies that are great, I think great entertainment is also great art. Shakespeare is entertainment. Edgar Allan Poe is pure entertainment. Great entertainment is great art, I think. I think the making of great movies is the most improbable crapshoot of all. Great art, the original thought originates with a single mind. The minute you have to start having other people work on it, you begin to dilute the idea, whether it's a conception for a bridge, or a building, or a movie, or a design for clothing, whatever it is. The pure original Platonic ideal is one that originates in a single mind. Movies are a collaborative medium. That means that if you've got 100 people working on this particular dream, one is going to be, if not a genius, at least original, brilliant, bright, a ramrod. 30 of them are going to be really good at what they do. 20 of them are going to be just sort of in the middle, and 25 of them, or however many it takes to 100, are going to be, hod carriers. They wouldn't be any goddamn better if they were plumbers or electricians or brain surgeons. The minute you start to work in a collaborative medium, you are going to run the risk, 99 times out of 100, it seems to me, of winding up with something that is not going to make it. When it does make it, when you wind up with a Casablanca or a Maltese Falcon or Treasure of the Sierra Madre, you can usually see that there was one guiding intelligence there, or Citizen Kane. And if it's not one guiding intelligence, it's a guiding intelligence that has selected carefully and has made sure that everyone else around him or her is just as wonky and crazy. That's when you get a really good film. Otherwise, what you get is Norman Rockwell.
And that leads us back to comics. How the hell are we ever going to make comics come to movies when comics, what makes us love comics, and I think what makes it such a wonderful art form, is how few people are involved in putting it out. And in fact, in comics you have a mirror image of what's going on in film. Charlie talks about the independent companies versus the big Hollywood companies. Well, we have independents in comics too. And we're often amazed with what these one guy or one woman with a singular vision does, especially when they put it all together. Where do we go from here? How do we bring that purity of vision that we feel so strongly about in comics to Hollywood and make them do it the way we want to see it? What are your thoughts about this?
Todd McFarlane, president of Paramount.
Maybe he's not.
What?
Yes.
I think one of the major problems with comics is that it's very difficult to translate into film without it being prohibitively expensive. You're not going to get, you've got the problem with Roger Corman's Fantastic Four film. See, it's not very good because the budget was so low that they weren't able to do what they wanted to do.
No, it was not good because it was dope.
You know something? I have to say something about that. I mean, it's true. Especially if you're aiming towards a film that is an effects film, you need to be able to deliver some effects. but most of it has to do with talent, believe me. It's writing, it's casting, it's direction. It's, you know, we're so jaded. I mean, you go to the movie, God, a few weeks ago, every trailer has 8 billion explosions in it. I mean, this is a summer of pyrotechnics. It's just every picture has it. I mean, this has nothing to do with it, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, a few well-placed explosions can be far out, but this has nothing to do at all with making films. And great films are made on very small budgets. Great films have little to do with what you're actually talking about. I mean, I've seen Roger Corman's Fantastic Four as well. Maybe everyone has, because I've yet to find people who haven't. And I got to tell you that even though it was a very low-budget film, had there been a good script and really good performances and a director with vision, it could have been a good movie. Now, it's not going to compare to what you know, Cameron's going to do with $1 trillion. And the man has some talent. But I disagree. I think you can make wonderful pictures if there's talent involved. The trouble is there's no talent around. There's very little talent around.
With a film like 4 years ago, Darkman came out. And I thought that was a terrific film. It was made for about $10–15 million. It did fairly well. But the problem is with the mentality is that you want to have Batman Forever, which is going to cost $100 million and be modeled probably like the last film. And it's trying to convince people that you can take a comic idea and have it be straightforward and have effects and have things like that and do it within, you know, $10–15 million.
Yeah.
Final question.
I think what's interesting is the fact that talking about the independents, especially in the comic industry, what's doing well in translation is that they're now going to the independent comic companies taking their story, The Mask, The Crow, things of that nature. And so finally, at least the major studios are looking at the independent comic companies and saying, hey, there is some originality here, and going that route with it, instead of, you know, the Batman Forever, and dragging that series out to where we'll have Batman in the old age home pretty soon, because we'll be up to Batman 10, because they don't want to.
Well, there's no question this is an incredible fertile, you know, ground for ideas. Look, in those bins out there or downstairs, there's 8 billion movie ideas. I mean, now of course a lot of this comes from pulps and things before comics, so it's not that so much of that is so original, but hey, this is where it's at. Yeah.
I think the bottom line is this. You can't do a movie and you can't do a comic book without a story. And to do a story, you gotta have a writer, and he's gotta know how to write. I think we all are coming from the same place because we all want to tell the same stories. So maybe the next generation of films we see in TV shows are written by the people that we're reading in comic books right now. I think that's maybe the direction we want to see it going in.
Amen.
Anyways, we gotta wrap this up. I want to thank you all for coming, and we'll continue this conversation.